One of the most important things that we can talk about when it comes to living with a chronic illness is finances. And while this episode in particular isn't necessarily about finances, Rhonda does have a really good understanding of working with insurance and learning how to get the support and the care that you need through your insurance, which I think is getting harder and harder these days. And I'm not really laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because sometimes that's all you can do when you're trying not to cry. So, yeah, I really don't know what will happen with the insurance over the next 4 years. I know personally, I was declined this past summer from like a non ACA plan for a pre existing condition of anxiety. So, that is how crazy it is right now. And I anticipate that it will only get worse, but I'm trying not to put too much of that out into the atmosphere and listening to people who actually have experience with insurance, like Rhonda. I don't really utilize my insurance a whole lot. I have mostly always gone with functional medicine, and I can talk a lot more about my journey with that um, in a different episode. But for today, our episode revolves around one, the emotional toll that it takes on a family when one of the children have a chronic illness. And so Rhonda shares a little bit of that about that with us. And so you can expect to hear how her daughter's siblings handled it and some of the conversations they had to have as a family. And then in the second half of the episode, Rhonda talks more about patient advocates through your insurance and case managers through your insurance as well, which was something new that I had just learned. So I hope that you enjoy this episode. And if you have any questions or you want to work with Rhonda, especially as it relates to figuring out more of the financial resources, she has a ton of experience with that and does offer that guidance in her coaching services. Also, please remember that the membership is now live and active. It's the mentally well while chronically ill membership. And in there, we're doing a lot of work around acceptance and more of the mindset stuff, which again, I just want to be clear that all of that should be in addition to things like resources and finances and all of that. Mindset work is not a replacement for things actually changing and resources being utilized. Our next workshop is going to be on February 22nd at 10:30 Eastern. And it's going to be on sex and intimacy and chronic illness. And basically, we're going to be talking about what it's like when your pain stops you from enjoying your body and being intimate with your partner despite you wanting to be. So, this is for people who have a genuine desire to reconnect. And this is not coming from a place of you should want to, or, that's what, yeah, there's no shoulds in here. This is for people who just genuinely are missing that and feel like they can't because of their pain. So I'm bringing on sex therapist Camilla Jones, and we're going to be working through talking about exploring and moving past shame and guilt, ways to connect sexually without pain, personal pleasure and its importance for psychological and spiritual well-being, communicating needs and boundaries with your partners, and practical strategies for managing symptoms during intimacy. So I'm looking forward to that one. I hope you are too. And it is, again, Saturday, February 22nd at 10:30. It's $27. But if you're on my email list and if you are in need of a reduced rate, I do have a discount code available for you. It's a pay what you can on our system. So we just ask that if you can pay it, you do. But if you cannot, then we are more than happy for you to come for free. The Chronic Illness Therapist podcast is meant to be a place where people with chronic illnesses can come to feel heard, seen, and safe while listening to mental health therapists and other medical professionals talk about the realities of treating difficult conditions. This might be a new concept for you, one in which you never have to worry about someone inferring that it's all in your head. We dive deep into the human side of treating complex medical conditions and help you find professionals that leave you feeling hopeful for the future. I hope you love what you learned here, and please consider leaving a review or sharing this podcast with someone you love. This podcast is meant for educational purposes only. For specific questions related to your unique circumstances, please contact a licensed medical professional in your state of residence. Rhonda Thorrington is a licensed professional counselor with a remarkable career spanning over 20 years. Throughout her journey, she's been devoted to providing mental health treatment to individuals of all ages, including children, families, and adults in diverse roles and settings. Rhonda currently operates a thriving private practice that focuses on specialized care for children and families. In 2012, her life took a turn when one of her three children was diagnosed with mixed connective tissue disease at the age of 4. Drawing from her personal experiences, she now uses her clinical expertise to coach families facing life changing medical diagnoses. Through coaching, Rhonda shares valuable tools and strategies developed throughout her own journey, empowering families to navigate these challenges with resilience, self advocacy, and hope. Her aim is to help families reduce feelings of overwhelm and discover lives that are not defined by a diagnosis. Rhonda, I'm so glad we're talking about this today because a lot of us have our own chronic illnesses, but some of us are navigating the illness of our child and some of us are navigating both. So I am really curious to hear, maybe you can share a little bit about your story and kind of where this all started for you, and we can just kind of figure out where to go from there.
Yeah, sounds great. So as you read in my bio, and I always have to chuckle when people read my bio because I'm always like, who's that they're talking about?
I
Um,
understand that.
yeah. So yeah, so in 2012, I had, my second of three children. She was like 4 at the time, and I had just had my third, who was a newborn. My daughter got sick. At this time I was, in private practice. I was an adjunct professor at a local university, and life was great. And she woke up one day and had lots of bruising,
Mhm.
and in places that kids shouldn't have bruising, right? Like on her back and, places like that. And she didn't, what gave me cause for concern is that she didn't remember falling and the bruises didn't seem to hurt her. So, went to the doctor, did lots of testing, started out at our local children's hospital, ended up going to Boston Children's Hospital because our local children's hospital really couldn't manage what was going on. So, fast forward like 8 months, and she was given a diagnosis of mixed connective tissue disease. And she went from being this like vibrant, brave, tenacious little girl to someone who was very sick
Mm.
and sad and physically weak, emotionally weak, and it took a toll. It took a toll on her. It took a toll on our family. I had to greatly scale back, with my practice. I was like on the trajectory to open up a group practice and really expand, but I had to really scale back on that, and I had to leave my adjunct position, which broke my heart, but my family needed me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I became, really adept at reading lots of, medical reports and labs and questioning doctors and advocating for her. And at the same time making sure that the rest of our family remained intact and that my other two children were getting their needs met, and that I was focusing on my primary relationship with my husband and all of the things while managing my daughter's condition. She had several years where things were very unstable. We had lots of concerning conversations with doctors. And we ended up, when she was 9, we ended up going to the National Institutes of Health for a week because her doctors at Boston Children were scratching their heads. They didn't know what was going on. The medications that were supposed to work didn't work. The way that her condition was presenting itself was not typical. Her flares looked different every single time, so we never knew what to expect. And so we had conversations around, could this be an atypical presentation of leukemia? Do we need to, we need to kind of throw everything at her so she's not in a wheelchair by the time she's 16. So lots of scary, scary things. Um, but the National Institutes of Health was able to kind of, narrow down her diagnosis and they came up with a treatment plan for her. And since she's been on that treatment plan, she's been doing well. She's had periods of time where she's gone into clinical remission. And then she came out of it, but that's okay. And so because even though she's not in remission now, she is doing much better than she was before we knew what was going on with her. And, fast forward to today, she's a freshman in college, graduated high school at the top of her class. She was valedictorian, which is amazing because at one point she couldn't attend school at all. From
Yeah.
second through fifth grade, she was homebound. So, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So a
Wow.
lot.
Yes. How did she stay up to date with school? Like, was she a studier? Is she naturally smart? Is she
Mm.
tell me, like, how yeah.
Yeah, so that it's interesting. She is a very hard worker. She got tutoring, and it's just such a blessing how this unfolded, because having to advocate for her, I didn't realize at the time that, in our state, Connecticut, if a child misses 10 consecutive school days, they should automatically be offered home tutoring. And that didn't happen. I didn't realize that that was even a thing until I educated myself. So she had been home for probably a few months, and when I realized that, wait, she's supposed to get this tutoring, and then I advocated for her, a 4th grade teacher at her school offered to do tutoring. And so she would come a few days a week, and tutor her on all the things that she missed. And the way that, she worked with my daughter is that, it was year round, so that during the summer months when she would feel better, she would work with her to get her ahead of her class, so that in the fall
Wow.
and winter when she would feel, more sick, she wasn't really falling behind, she was kinda just falling back to where the class was. And she
Yeah.
was just an extremely hard work and we were blessed because, Jamie, or her tutor, she knew when to push her,
Mm.
and she knew when to kinda let her take a break.
Does she have the
So
same tutor throughout?
she had the same tutor throughout. So once, my daughter's name is Rhea. Once Rhea entered, 6th grade, Jamie worked with her from 3rd grade through 7th grade. And then after that, she really didn't need, a tutor because she had extra supports at school, which worked well. So yeah, Rhea learned to be she's a very hard worker. One of the issues with her condition is she would have short-term memory issues. She would have lots of headaches. So, she learned strategies to manage that. So, she's a note taker, lots of repetition. At one point, her short-term memory was so debilitated that, Jamie would have to teach her the same concepts over and over and over again before they would stick. And you can imagine, like, at the age where she's learning multiplication and when she's learning, like, two-step division, that was really, really challenging. But she kept at it. She kept at it. And yeah, she's a really, really hard worker. So
Well, I that's amazing that she had pretty much that she had the same tutor. I think we don't talk enough about, like, it's not just about the resources, but it really is about the connections and the community around us.
exactly. Yeah, and yeah, having she was Jamie was the right tutor for her at the right time, and it was so wonderful because, we obviously don't see her anymore, but at my daughter's, graduation party from, high school, it was very important to her that Jamie be invited, and so Jamie came with her husband and her 2 kids, and when we met Jamie, she wasn't even dating her husband. So, but to, like, see her with her husband and her 2 kids, it was just wonderful. It was such a full circle moment. So, yeah.
What do you think you would have done if this had happened and your child didn't want to do school, didn't want to work hard? Like, what do you think you might have had to do differently?
Yeah, I think that that's a really great question, and, not one that
You haven't
so
had to think about it.
right, I
Good.
haven't had to think about the school piece, but there are other pieces that I have had to think about, like other areas of her life where she's like, "I don't wanna do that." And I think what, I would have done differently is like having the hard conversation, right? And I had to do this just recently with her where, she had a challenge and she's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. It's too hard. And I said to her, since when do we quit? Because things are hard, honey, your whole life has been hard. And I'm sorry, though, but those are the cards you've been dealt. So oh, well, it's hard, we still keep moving. So I can't so kind of having that, that real conversation with her,
Yeah.
not minimizing,
No,
her
and I think
experience.
the
Yeah.
part that people probably should hear is, like, in that I can tell just from the little I know you, like, and from what you just shared about the resources that you got for your daughter, and you're talking about doing hard things, and you said, "Oh, well," but really it's like, we have resources, and whether it's emotional, financial, physical,
Mhm.
communal, we have resources that help us do the hard thing.
Right.
I'm not saying you need to go figure this out on your own and, like, "Oh, well, I don't care that you're suffering."
Right.
It's not like that at all. It's
Yeah.
like I think that this is so important because I think right now in, like, gentle parenting, which is a very it's
Mhm.
really just authoritative parenting that that social media calls gentle parenting.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of discourse around, like, gentle parenting. It and really what people are describing as permissive parenting. And they're
Mhm.
doing it permissively because they're trying to not be so authoritarian because that feels mean or it feels cruel, and but authoritative is that beautiful mix where it's like, as the adults who know what's best or who we think we know what's best, um, we're going to put forth like what we think you need to do. We're going to push you towards that. But we're not going to just say like no means no and like not explain anything to you and not help you. We're going to give you, we're going to walk alongside with you.
Mhm, mhm. Right, right. Yeah, and yeah, and when I said yeah, to say, "Oh, well," yeah, not to be dismissive in any way. So thank you for clarifying that. But I think that yeah, absolutely. It's about, always looking into the future, like what kind of adult do I want her to be? And I want her to be an adult that can kind of dig in. I want her to be an adult that has the tools that when she experiences a challenge, she can push through, with the resources, with the supports in place. So that's always been in the back of my mind, because again, having been in this field for a while, I have witnessed, children that have had challenges and that, permissive parenting, that enabling of children. And that is something for early on that me and my husband were clear about that we did not want for her, because unfortunately, this diagnosis is one that she's going to have to figure out figure out how to live with for the rest of her life. So, and I want her to have as full of a life as she can have. So, yeah, so it's important for us to kind of give her the supports to kind of be able to push through. So, yeah.
And I think there's such a difference as you were talking about it, what came to mind is there's such a difference between a child saying, coming to you and saying, "Mom, Dad, I do not want to do this thing anymore." Like, that is not of interest to me.
Mhm.
It's not whatever. And there's a conversation about it, which is so different than this is hard and I feel like I can't do it. And so I'm gonna beg you to let me stop. But really what I actually want is support and help with continuing because I do want the thing at the other end of
Mhm.
this. So for people listening and you're like, well, how do I know? And how do I like it? We're therapists, so communication is at the heart of what we do.
Mhm.
But if every family had um more act like if every family was more able to have these conversations on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis with their families, what's important to us? Where are we going next? You said you and your husband made that decision early on, like this is how we what are some of the hard conversations? And you don't even have to go totally into specifics, but like, can we just talk about the hard conversations you have to have as a family to make sure everyone's on the same page
Mhm.
and that there isn't a ton of division, especially in a family of five?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. There have definitely been some challenging conversations. And again, it's all goes back to being intentional. Like, my husband and I will often, at pivotal times, in our relationship, we will sit down and talk about, okay, what are our goals for the next year? Often we'll do it like around our anniversary. We'll kind of do a debrief of, okay, how was this past year for us as a couple, as a family? And what do we want to see in this next year? What do we want to see in these next 5 years, for our kids, for us? And, we're real intentional about sitting down and having those conversations. And I think, for our kids too, one of the things that I will do with our kids, like at the end of each school year, we do a debrief where we go to, I don't know if y'all have Sweet Frog, but we go out for frozen yogurt and we sit around and we do an end of the year debrief. What were your goals? What did you accomplish? What worked? What didn't work? What do you want to do differently the next school year? And so we'll sit around and we'll have that discussion and we'll carry that into, the next school year. And so I say all of that to say we always have goals that we're working toward, individually and collectively as a family. And, sometimes, you know, the other thing we always do is create space for each of them to share what it is they're feeling, what it is they're experiencing. So, when my daughter was younger, especially when her health was really unstable, we had made space for her siblings to talk about what they were feeling. I remember one night, my son, uh, I went to say goodnight to him, and one of the traditions I created with him was filling his mind with good things. So I would fill his mind with something good to think about, overnight, as a way to kind of, help him start the next day in a positive way. And one night he asked me, he said, "Mommy, is Rhea gonna die?" He was probably like 9, 10 years old at the time. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, baby, no. Why would you ask that?" And he said, "Because she goes to the hospital a lot." And we had just had a family member who had passed away from leukemia and she was in and out of the hospital. And he says, "Because Auntie Brenda was always in the hospital and she died. So is Rhea going to die too?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh." So we had to have like a really, in depth conversation. And I realized in that moment that, you know what? I haven't been talking with them enough about what's going on. So,
Yeah.
so I gave him like a little mini immunology lesson about, what's happening, in Rhea's body with her immune system and what the medication does and how this situation is very different. And, yes, Auntie Brenda had something going on in her immune system too, but it was very different from what's happening in Rhea's immune system and so on and so on and so on. So really creating space for them um to ask questions and have conversations. So, often I would do it in the car as well. "Oh, hey, my youngest, Michaela, baby, come with me. I want to go to the grocery store. Go to the grocery store with me." And we would talk in the car. "What kinds of questions do you have about what's going on with Rhea? What is it you want to know? What is it you want to talk about?" And even asking them, "Are you getting enough? Are you getting enough from mommy? I know mommy has to spend a lot of time at the hospital with Rhea, but I wanna make sure that I'm spending time with you guys too." So really, like, laying the groundwork for those conversations is so important that we found as a family.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, inviting that whatever their answers are. What happens? Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about for parents who are listening, how this conversation can go awry. In other words, like what maybe negative things or hard things your kids can respond with to these questions, and then how we can handle that so that we're still the adult in the room and handling it with them.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I always recommend to parents is focus on the feelings, right? Focus on the feelings that are underneath the question. Like for my son, in that at that night, he was scared. He was scared, he was anxious, he was unsure. So that's what I focused on. That's, "Honey, there's a lot of things about this that we don't know, but this is what we do know. This is what we know to be true, and that's what we focus so that's really what I always recommend to parents, and that is in doing so, then you do remain the adult in the room.
Yeah,
So
we're validating the feelings, not necessarily condoning any behaviors that are maladaptive or bad or however you want to label
yeah,
them, but we're just validating like you have a right to be scared. And when we name it and don't freak out, when we as the parents don't freak out about it, we can kind of remain calm with not calm as in numb, but calm as in we're with them in
right.
it. We're not freaking out. And I
Exactly.
think they learn from that.
Exactly, because kids need to know that whatever they bring to us, we can contain it. So, I used to, in another lifetime, I worked in residential treatment with children coming out of psychiatric hospitalizations. And it would always, parents would always be amazed at how children were able to function in this environment. And one of the things I would always share with parents is because they know that whatever they bring to us, we're going to be able to handle it. So, if their behavior is scary to you, it sure as heck is scary to them. And if they look at you as the adult and think, oh my goodness, mommy and daddy can't even handle this, that is hugely destabilizing. So kids need to know that you can contain whatever it is that they bring to you. And that leads to that sense of safety.
Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to when your daughter got the right treatment, when you finally kind of figured out the right diagnosis, and it sounds like you got the diagnosis and then also that it still took a little time to get the right treatment.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about was that medication? Was it physical therapy routines? Like, of course, you don't have to give like, her exact kind of regimen, but I do think people really struggle with the concept of what the right treatment looks like. Can we
Yeah.
just get some examples of what that might be?
Mhm, mhm. So for my daughter, and I wanna be careful because, the right treatment didn't necessarily result in her, uh, like, all of a sudden having this idyllic kid life, right? The right treatment resulted in, her immune system no longer attacking her body. And it interestingly enough, the right treatment for her, she was allergic to it. So, for her, getting the right treatment meant that she had to go into the hospital for 3 days every 6 months to get this medication. So it was, medication, it was, therapy for her, it to deal with, the anxiety and the social stuff, the challenges that came along with being and feeling different. And it was capitalizing on her strengths. So, again, we were real intentional about helping her to identify her strengths and being creative in helping her to capitalize on. So that meant, finding a piano teacher for her that could take her during the day when she had the most energy. She wasn't able to go to school, but she could do piano in the middle of the day while her siblings were at school. That meant finding a dance studio because she loves to dance that was willing to work with her even if she couldn't attend because she was sick. Those weeks that she was well enough, she worked one on one with the owner so that she could still participate and still, be a part of the recitals and those kinds of things. So it was, really being intentional about identifying what those strengths are and being creative in helping her to participate in those things. Because I think as a parent of a child with a chronic illness, oftentimes we have to be really creative in how we support our children. And I tell people, all the time, you can still do the things. It just may not look the same way that it looks to other people, you know? So like for a long time, we didn't go on vacation as a family because I thought, oh my gosh, it's too hard. It is too hard, and then I was like, "You know what? This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous." It's one of my favorite lines from I love The Shawshank Redemption, and one of my favorite lines is, "You gotta get busy living or get busy dying." And so I was like, "Okay, we're gonna go on vacation, but we're gonna have to pack a whole bunch of medications. We're gonna have to make sure we have travel insurance. We're gonna have to make sure that I know where all the major hospitals are in the vicinity, so we can still go on vacation. It just looks different than how it would look with other families." So
Yes, thank
what's
you for painting that
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, so just creating that shift for me was extremely helpful.
Yes, such good advice. Even just a small saying like, know where the hospitals are, bring the Medicaid. Like, yes, it is. It's interesting because like on social media, parents will joke about how vacationing with little kids is just like it's just being a parent, and it's like the same shit, but like in a different, like on the
Yeah.
beach.
Yeah, yep, exactly. There's nothing relaxing. It's not a
Exactly.
vacation, it's a trip.
Right. Exactly. But so it's like funny on that end. But what I'm hearing with you is like, yeah, but it was still important for us. It was still important for us to have those vacations and to get away or to what was your reasoning for wanting to go on vacation? What made that like so worth it?
Mhm.
That was gonna be hard.
Yeah, because it was a time for us to bond and have, like, the fun, typical things that other families can, Because not only was it different. Not only did my daughter feel different, but, her siblings, were impacted as well. So it was so vitally important for us to have the things that other families have, even if we have to go about it differently. So that's why it was important. I didn't want, and her siblings, they're just, you know, siblings of kids with chronic illness or rare disease are just such a special breed entirely, because they have a level of adaptability and flexibility and empathy that is not often seen in, I quote unquote regular kids. But I just wanted them to be able to have an experience where we can just be like, their friend down the street who went to Disney World. Yes, we can go to Disney World too. And to just have the fun and have the bonding and have the togetherness that other families could have.
And yeah, that just kind of ties the ball back into we talked a little bit about values earlier and getting very clear on yeah, what our values are, what our strengths are
Mhm.
as a family, not just as helping our child who is sick figure it
Right.
out for themselves. We also have to know what it is for each person in the family and then us as a family unit as one.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
What are some of the other things that you often find yourselves educating parents about or helping parents work through in this realm?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I work with parents a lot around is advocacy. I the and I'm guil well, I was somewhat guilty of it. Yeah, I was guilty of that myself. Uh, for me, I had a background in, medical research prior to being a therapist. So when I, interacted with doctors, I understood, okay, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like I do. They're human beings. They're not, these all-knowing creatures. But a lot of the families that I worked with didn't realize that you can get a second opinion. You can disagree with the course of action that your doctor is suggesting. You get to make a decision about who your child sees and who you see. And I really work a lot with families around understanding that this is a relationship. If you were in any other relationship, if you felt like you weren't being heard, if you felt like you were being dismissed, if you felt like you were being disrespected, you'd be out of there. So the same holds true for your relationship with your medical provider. So really having that conversation with parents and kind of giving them the scripts to say, they in my coaching capacity. That is what I work with parents around a lot. Um, it One of the things that you wanna make sure of is you wanna make sure that you and your provider are aligned in your treatment goals, right? Just like we as therapists, right? We have to make sure that our clients' goals are our goals. We're not, running rogue and doing our own thing. Um, the same is true with our medical providers. I often have run into working with families where the medical provider may be of the mindset of, just symptom control. The parent may be looking for complete remission and healing. If you aren't aligned, then that is going to be a really dysfunctional relationship. So I had a circumstance with a family that I was working with where it was just that, where the provider was looking at managing symptoms. The family wanted a remission and healing. And so after, I worked with them, they made the decision to seek out a different provider. And their child, well, their young adult now is in remission. But they had to understand that, it's okay. It's okay to get a second opinion. They had to recognize that that discord, existed and that their opinion mattered. So,
This conversation comes up a lot in my own work too. Sometimes the pushback, understandably so, is we've spent so much time and so much money, you know, um, and so maybe we can speak a little bit to the money aspect of this,
mhm,
but still from a framework of like the way that I view it, and you can tell me if you did, veer from this or if we're on the same page, but the money choices, yes, there is a dollar amount that's in our bank accounts and that our paycheck provides, but there's also a values aspect that goes along with it.
right,
There's a
right.
great grief too. Yes, I would rather spend my money on more vacations a year.
Yep,
Um, and there's a grief in the fact that I have to spend the money on something that I wish didn't exist to begin with. This sickness. But
yeah.
but I do value proper care. I value quality health, and unfortunately, in our country, we have to pay for that.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on the money conversation and what it's like to kind of switch up doctors and maybe just speak to some of the obstacles or the hesitations that families might have, and then how we work through those.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, yeah, that the the money conversation is so very real. So very real. It's one that, I've experienced and still experience personally, right? I don't even I'm so glad that insurances now they no longer put on the explanation of benefits like how much money has been spent toward your care. I think when my daughter turned 10, she had passed the $1,000,000 mark. And I was like, "Holy smokes." So now I can't even think about like how much has been spent on her care up till now. Um, but it is it's a very real conversation, it's a very real concern. And what I often will lay out to parents, again, that whole notion of, you can do the thing. It just has to be done a little differently than the way someone else would do it. So, when it comes to financially, that might look like, looking for grants. It might look like doing fundraising. It might look like contacting pharmaceutical companies directly to see what kinds of resources they have, talking to the social workers at the hospital so that you can find out, does your insurance company have what is it called? A nonprofit, um, a nonprofit arm where they will actually give money to people to get the services that they need. And all of these things that I mentioned are things that my family has been availed of over the years. I've done every single one of those things. And, there's a part of it where, there's such a level of like cognitive dissonance, right? Like You know, I am a therapist. I am well educated. On paper it looks like I make a pretty decent amount of money, but we have this huge financial burden. So I'm going to have to let go of my pride, and I'm going to have to reach out to the people that have the resources that I need, because by any means necessary, I'm going to make sure that my child has what she needs. Um, so I think oftentimes families don't realize that there are so many resources out there for them, and that, just because, a hospital says you owe, I don't know, $10,000 for a particular treatment, which, we've had that happen, right? Before the No Surprises Act, we got a bill from the hospital that says, "Oh, this one treatment that your daughter's gonna need every month for the rest of her life is gonna cost $10,000." And so my husband and I had to sit down and say, "Okay, what we gonna do? We gonna sell the house? We gonna move into an apartment? We gonna move in with our parents because she needs this?" So I get, like, those real discussions. Um, but with all of that being said, there are so many resources that people just are not aware of, that I wasn't aware of until I reached out and started inquiring. And so now that's some of what I share with my families. Um, just real quick, United Healthcare, huge insurance. They have a children's foundation, the United Healthcare Children's Foundation. And what that foundation does is it gives money to families with private insurance. It doesn't have to be United Healthcare, it can be any private insurance, to cover things that your insurance won't cover. And they'll give you $10,000 for
Wow.
something like a wheelchair, or, I don't know, physical therapy that's not covered by your insurance. They'll do that. So I had no idea that that even existed until I reached out to the hospital social worker at my daughter's hospital. So that's just one of the resources that parents can avail, can seek out. But I always tell parents, no is just the first response. It's never the final answer. So,
It's a game and it takes a lot of executive functioning, a lot of administrative energy. And
yes.
that's why we need so much support around it because one, you can't know everything. And then two, you can't do everything. And you got to take a break sometimes and then come back at it and then take another break and come back at it. And it's
Mhm.
hard. And
It's very hard.
yeah.
Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think that that's a great, just to even get people started. Like, okay, you might not know where to start, but call your even. I shouldn't speak too much about this because I don't know enough to. I really want to do a whole episode with someone who's an expert on it. But patient advocates, do you know? Can
Yes.
you speak
Mhm.
to any? Have you worked with them? And
I have. Yeah, I have worked with some patient advocates, and it's funny because some are really great, some not so much. So it really does,
no,
it's kind of the luck of the draw. And what I will say to people is, if you get a patient advocate that is wonderful, hang on to them with all your might. If you get one that's not so great, don't be afraid to ask for someone else. So, anytime, going back to like insurance companies, anytime your child has um a complicated medical history, or if you have a complicated medical history, most insurance companies will assign a nurse case manager to you, or some kind of advocate to help with the case management tasks. So, and their purpose is to help you navigate through some of these challenging things.
and that's
It's
just covered through every
covered through
insurance company.
insurance. It's not anything extra, not anything extra. I had, with our previous insurance, I had an amazing, like, a nurse case manager who was amazing. And there would be instances where my daughter would need, like, a particular treatment. Let's say it was scheduled for a Tuesday, and I'm on the phone with her on a Thursday because the insurance still has not approved it. And she would say, "Okay, I'm going to call you right back. She would call back and she said, "I just went in to see the medical director. His office is next door to mine. It's approved and you'll get, notified." So she was amazing. Would not have known that that was even an option had I not researched it a little bit, you know? And then, fast forward, I've had, nurse case managers who couldn't do anything for me. So, but there are really good ones out there. But you do have to, and this is something that's already taken care of within your insurance. You're paying for it, so you might as well utilize it.
And just to extra clarify, because if you're like me who insurance just feels like a foreign language and
Yeah.
one that I can't ever grasp, you do call your insurance to
Yes.
get connected. This is not through the hospital, this is not through a doctor's office, it is through your insurance and you just call them directly.
Yep, you just call them and you say, I would like a nurse case manager, and they should connect you with someone. Absolutely. Yep.
Amazing. Any other resources come to mind that, like, people haven't don't tend to think about, or something that was really helpful to you in your journey?
Mhm. Um, you know, interestingly enough, YouTube. I think YouTube is a really underutilized
Yeah.
resource for families. So I will say to go on YouTube and just do the search for your child's condition and researcher. And oftentimes, videos will come up with people who are doing the research into your child's condition, rare disease, your rare disease, and you will get valuable information about people who are really on the cutting edge of treatment and research. So, my it was I was working with a family once, and um the parent contacted me in a bit of a crisis because they had gotten some really, not great information from their child's doctor. And I did a YouTube search while I was on the phone with this parent. And I said, "Okay, I'm forwarding you this link. This person seems to know what they're talking about. Why don't you check into it?" And that really changed the trajectory of the child's treatment at that point.
Amazing.
So yeah, so I think that, really just Googling and YouTubing, and finding out who is researching it. The other thing that parents don't often avail themselves of are research conferences. Like, the rarer the condition, the more you want to affiliate yourself with the people who are researching the condition. Not the people who are simply just treating it and reading about, these research studies. You want to connect yourself with the people who are actually doing the research studies. So, going to, and often with a lot of research conferences or even pharmaceutical conferences, they will have the researchers there, and there's always a patient and caregiver component to the conference. So don't think, oh, this research, it's just for these medical people and they're going to be talking over my head. No, 99% of the time there's a caregiver arm, a caregiver track that you can follow, and it's always people who are speaking directly to you as the patient and caregiver. So, and that is hugely useful in networking and finding resources for you and your family. And that's something that families don't often think of. A real quick story. My godbrother has multiple sclerosis, and he was the second person in the country to ever get a stem cell transplant for MS. The way that happened is that his mother, who is a nurse, researched a doctor who was doing this kind of treatments, and she went to a conference where he spoke. And she pulled him aside after the conference, explained her son's situation, and fast forward, he ended up getting a stem cell transplant and was in remission for, I believe, 10 years from it.
That's amazing.
So, but that wouldn't have happened had she not gone to this conference.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I do agree. I think people don't know about, like, these medical conferences, or, it's really only advertised to, like, doctors who
yes.
maybe are treating and who are interested in learning, but
Mhm.
Yeah, it's true. We really do. That's part of the problem, I think, is how much education is required when you have a chronic illness.
Yes.
Much learning is required. And if you don't have the time or the money, or if learning was like never really, let's just be honest, like if it wasn't your strong suit,
Right.
or if you have a learning disability, or if there are any of these obstacles, it is hard. But with YouTube,
Yep.
it breaks it down and
For sure.
it's such a good resource.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, seeking out, resources like, therapists or a coach or consultant, like, the work that I'm doing, it's like I can, I will, tell parents, okay, look, this is what, call the doctor and this is what you say, or, advocating for your child at school, I want you to say this exact sentence and their ears are going to perk up and you're gonna get like some movement in whatever the issue is that you're challenged with. So I think kind of being able, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do need to know where to go to try to get answers.
Exactly. Yeah. And then again, to reiterate, like that's the work that you do because as someone is telling you what their story is or what they're struggling with, you're like, okay, yeah, I don't know the answer to this, but I do know where we can find it. And that is more than what the parent might have even known.
Right.
And then you go to cheerleader and you've got someone who is like in it with you and guiding you in a way that gives you confidence to then, which for me gives me energy too. So if I have
Mhm.
no energy, but
Yeah.
then somebody, like, seems to have a direction or an answer, like, I'm immediately, like, perked up, like, I'm ready to, like, go take on that challenge again.
Mhm.
But if
Mhm.
I am just, like, YouTubing alone and I'm like, "Okay, kinda get it, kinda get that," but I'm, like, alone in my own head, I can easily be like, forget about it or stay really demotivated. So, yeah, it's just really, really nice to have somebody, a human, working with you on it.
Exactly. Exactly. And someone who like who's been through it, right? Yeah, like I have sat in those rooms and felt like, "Oh my gosh, I am as dumb as a doorknob here. I have no idea what these people are talking about, and I'm so intimidated." I know what that's like, So, being able to kinda coach someone through that is vital. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else that comes to mind before we hop off? Anything you wanna leave people with or topics that we didn't cover that yeah, that you can think of?
So the only thing, what comes to mind, like in the vein of like the whole discussion that we've been having today, like advocacy and empowerment, is specifically, when you're managing your own chronic illness or your child's chronic illness, is that you may find yourself in a room surrounded by, people with lots of letters after their names, but but they don't know you and they don't know your child. You are the expert in yourself. You are the expert in all things pertaining to your child. They don't know the look that your child has on their face when they don't feel well in their body. They don't know the sound of their voice the millisecond before they're going into an asthma attack. They don't know, the things that you know because you've been with your child since birth. So when you go into those situations, when you go into those rooms, arm yourself with that knowledge. So as a way to empower yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. I
So
love the examples too. Thank you so much. Yeah.
you're
Hey,
welcome.
so you do still see therapy clients in Connecticut, but you do parent coaching
Yes.
from wherever,
Yep.
and your website is
ResilientParentConsulting.com. Yep.
perfect. And
That's
I'll
my
link that in the
website.
show notes too.
Okay. And you can
Um,
find me on social media too. Instagram at RT Parent Coach and Facebook, Rhonda Thornton Parent Coach, and
okay,
LinkedIn, Rhonda Thornton Parent Coach too. So yeah, you can find
perfect.
me on all your social media. So
Love it. I'm so glad. Thank you so much, Rhonda.
you're so welcome, Destiny. Thank you for having me. Great discussion.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, consider writing it down in your phone notes or journal and make that new neural pathway light up. Better yet, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram, email me, or leave a voice memo for us to play on the next show. The way you summarize your takeaways can be the perfect little soundbite that someone else might need. And lastly, leaving a review really helps others find this podcast, so please do if you found this episode helpful. And P.S., clicking subscribe ensures you'll be here for the next episode. See you then!